Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. On this Monday, I'm not there. I'm in Hawaii. I'm on a beach. I'm reading, believe it or not, the Brothers Karamazov. Why? Because Arthur Brooks told me to do so. I've never done that. So that might last about one day. Then I might go back to reading about the war. But you need the news over the weekend. You need to know what happened. I got on a plane. Bruce Hooley got up and said, I will handle the first shift. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it much. Take it away from Columbus, Ohio.
Well, it is my pleasure, Hugh, and I appreciate the opportunity very much. It's great to be with you, America. I am Bruce Hooley from the ReliefFactor.com studios, originating today from Columbus, Ohio, the heartland, where it is a stormy day. The vestiges of the weather that brought deathly tornadoes to Iowa over the weekend is here, and that's somewhat fitting because the storm clouds are gathered all around our world today as the reports are still extremely depressing from Ukraine, where Russia has announced a third attempt at creating humanitarian corridors, a ceasefire. We've had 2 ceasefires over the last few days. They don't last. Hopefully this one will, but I'm not optimistic that it will. You wake up in America today where gas prices are the highest that they have been in 15 years, since 2008. And gas industry analysts expect that those prices will go even higher. And why would they not? Because yesterday, the price of oil skyrocketed to $130 per barrel. Now, if you're going $130 a barrel, I would like to have a frame of reference as to what oil was, say, before Russia invaded Ukraine. Well, in December, not that long ago, remember Christmas, December, end of the year, oil was $65 a barrel. Of course, the Biden administration would love you to believe that this is all Vladimir Putin driven, all the fault of his invasion of Ukraine. But of course, you're smart. You're a Hugh Hewitt show listener. You know better. You know that it is also a factor of the hatred that the Biden administration has for fossil fuels, for anything that would offend the green energy enthusiasts out there, and that this has been not just driven by the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but it has been driven by virtually the first stroke of Joe Biden's pen on his first day in office when he canceled the Keystone XL pipeline and sent an unmistakable message printed in neon that this administration would ravage the pocketbooks of everyday Americans who need gas to get to work, take their kids to soccer games, live some semblance of a life that they themselves order. I'd like to go here. I'd like to go there. The Democrats would love to keep you from doing that, either with mask mandates, vaccine mandates, restricting your activities, or if they can't get you to bend to their will, then we'll just get gas prices to go through the roof, and you won't be able to afford it. Joe Biden says he has not raised taxes or will not raise taxes on Americans making less than $400,000 a year. I am one of those Americans, and I believe he has raised my taxes every time I fill my tank. I'm paying about $30 more for one of my vehicles, about $40 more for another, and about $40 more for a third. Yes, I know it's very non-carbon friendly of me to have 3 vehicles. We have 3 drivers in the family, though, and we all have places we have to go, like jobs, in order to keep up. So we have a lot of headlines today. Ukraine, just incredibly touching and heart-wrenching images out of Ukraine of a bridge being blown up by a Russian bomb with a mom and 2 children on that bridge. A train station overrun with people trying to flee for their safety, soldiers carrying babies. This is a horrendous, horrendous situation. Of course, was the main topic of the Sunday news shows yesterday. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. Now, this is a very interesting approach. We, of course, can't do anything to make Vladimir Putin mad, because if we make him mad, then World War III might start. I would argue that it seems like it's already in process, particularly if Vladimir Putin gets Ukraine. What is to stop him from taking Latvia or Estonia or any of the other former portions of the USSR, the Soviet Union, that he would dearly love to put back together so that he could have the legacy of being the guy who reunited the Soviet Union. But let's pause for the moment on the debate of who would start World War III. Antony Blinken talking to Margaret Brennan saying that we can't establish a no-fly zone, and we don't want Vladimir Putin to think that we're shooting down his planes, so we would like Poland to send planes, and then we will send planes to Poland, and Vladimir Putin will not be able to figure out that we were behind the planes that may be doing what our planes dare not do. Here's Antony Blinken with Margaret Brennan.
No, that gets a green light. In fact, we're talking with our Polish friends right now about what we might be able to do to backfill their needs if, in fact, they choose to provide these fighter jets to the Ukrainians. What could we do? How can we help to make sure that they get something to backfill the planes that they're handing over to the Ukrainians? We're in very active discussions with them about that. Look, I've been in Europe for the last couple of days working closely, as always, with our allies and partners at NATO, the European Union, the G7 countries, and all of us together are continuing to take steps to increase the pressure on Russia through additional sanctions, all of which are very actively under discussion and will be implemented in the coming days, as well as taking further steps to give the Ukrainians what they need to defend themselves against the Russian aggression.
Oh, yes. Tony Blinken has been in Budapest, and he is back, and he has, as he said, really been working with people to try to put the squeeze on Vladimir Putin and his inroads into Ukraine. Reuters reported on Friday that we are close to brokering a new deal. What? Well, can't say new. We are close to reinstituting an old deal. Remember the JCPOA, also known as the Iran nuclear deal? Obama sent pallets of cash to Iran so that they could pursue but never reach nuclear capabilities. Okay, and Donald Trump said, probably a bad idea for Iran to have a nuclear weapon since they're pretty straightforward in their desire to blow Israel off the map. I'm going to cancel that. Of course, anything that Donald Trump did, Joe Biden must undo. So if Donald Trump undid the JCPOA, then Joe Biden must reinstitute it. And at this particular time, it just so happens, as our gas prices skyrocket and set the stage for a Democratic bloodbath in the midterm elections, it would be really wonderful if, in the eyes of the Biden administration at least, Iran would start to produce more oil. And so we are close, Reuters says, to getting Iran to produce more oil. Do you think they'd do that out of the goodness of their heart? I'm guessing no. They might want something for that. And what might they want? They might want the reinstitution of the JCPOA. Except Iran just, I don't know, they're funny this way. They don't like sitting down at the table with us. So we need a third party, according to Reuters, to kind of make this happen. And I know you think I'm putting you on here. Who would be a third party that Iran would be willing to have at the table in order to translate or facilitate a discussion with the United States of America so that the JCPOA could be reinstituted? So we can't strike a new deal with Iran because if we strike a new deal, there's this problematic matter of you have to run it by those busybodies in Congress. And those Republicans in Congress are probably going to frown upon a deal with Iran in order to get more oil. So Joe Biden says it's not a new deal with Iran. It is an old deal. We're just reinstituting it. It's already been approved. You don't have to get my approval. But who could broker such a deal? I know he's busy at the moment, but that someone would be Vladimir Putin or his underlings. Yes, I know. It's odd, isn't it? We're going to backfill planes, according to Tony Blinken, with Poland. Poland's going to send planes to Ukraine. Putin won't figure that out. We are also at the same time trying to get a new deal with Iran for more oil so our oil prices and gas prices can go down, and we're going to ask Putin to help us do that. It's all very weird, but it gets weirder, and we'll tell you how much weirder next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
The Hugh Hewitt Show is now available on TV. Go to salemnewschannel.com or download the app. You can also watch on Roku and Fire Stick. Salem News Channel, the antidote to the mainstream media.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with a clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on, and one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy. The guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you. You gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it again. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, everybody. I am Bruce Hooley, sitting in for Hugh Hewitt today. Hugh is vacationing in Hawaii, where I'm sure it is beautiful. It is a peaceful part of the world. Unfortunately, Ukraine is not a peaceful part of the world. The Russians have announced this morning that they are going to allow refugee safe passage out of certain cities. The problem with this is this has also been promised the last 2 days, and it has not come to fruition. I come to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios in Columbus, Ohio, with a reminder that every year at this time, Hugh turns to you for generous gifts to help Christian nonprofit Food for the Poor. Together, you and I are helping do very positive things to help feed hungry children in Honduras. So far, in our network-wide campaign, we've raised enough to feed over 700 children for the next year, but with 60% of Hondurans living below the poverty level and the entire country still suffering in severe poverty, there are many, many children who are in desperate need of your help. Just listen to Linda, who works for Food for the Poor in Honduras.
For 1 or 2 days, it just makes us real sad. The more we do, the more we see the need. The more places we go, the more we find people starving. The more we see children are eating the leaves from the trees.
It's so sad. That's why Hugh is partnering with Food for the Poor, because no child should be eating leaves when life-saving food is ready to be rushed. If only you will help, just go to HughHewitt.com, click on the Food for the Poor banner, or you can phone your donation to my special number, 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-HOPE. $88 feeds a hungry child for an entire year and provides access to clean water for a lifetime, or $175 offers the same blessing to 2 kids for a year. Any amount will help, and you will be blessed by helping share the love of Christ with the poorest of the poor in Honduras. One more time, please go to HughHewitt.com and help us feed more hungry kids through our friends at Food for the Poor. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper. You think it's weird that we're asking Vladimir Putin and Russia to help us broker a deal with Iran? Guess who else we are looking to have speak on our behalf with Vladimir Putin?
Jake, you're right. I spent about an hour on the phone with my counterpart, the Chinese foreign minister, the other day, and one of the things that I said to him, as I said actually before Russia committed this aggression against Ukraine, is that China speaks often about the sanctity of this principle of sovereignty, and here you have a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, the council that came into existence with the responsibility of keeping peace and security around the world, respecting the sovereignty of states. You have one of its permanent members violating that very principle. And so we would expect China, based on everything it's said in the past, to stand up and make its voice heard. Its voice is very important in this. And 141 countries in the UN system came forward to condemn Russia's aggression against Ukraine and to stand up for Ukraine. So we are looking to China to make its voice heard. That voice counts, and I hope that they'll do that.
It's been a while since I watched The Godfather, but I don't remember it that way. I remember the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I don't remember that my enemy is my friend. China is our enemy. I laugh at the absurdity of asking China for help. Do they not know already that China told Russia what we told China in confidence about what we gathered via intelligence regarding Putin's plans in Ukraine? That would seem to me to be a stop sign for including China in everything that we know, or asking them and expecting them to do us any favors in this matter. Russia, now denied Visa and MasterCard access, is turning to a company owned by China in order to facilitate those kinds of transactions. So I think it's pretty clear whose side China is on here. So we're asking Putin to help us with an Iran deal. We're asking China to help us with Russia. Wait, there's more. We are apparently asking Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan dictator, to step into the breach and provide us more oil. Details on that next. From the ReliefFactor.com studios, I'm Bruce Hooley, sitting in for Hugh on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Curious about what you're missing in the universe? The After Show? 21 years of Hugh Hewitt shows on demand? Go to www.huniverse.com right now, where it's only 99 cents to join for the first month. www.huniverse.com.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
It seems like the Democrats tried their best to try to eliminate the filibuster, and it failed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thankfully, it did fail. Republicans stood united against that, as we have been from the very beginning, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin also stood with us in preserving the rules and the customs of the Senate. These rules and customs go back more than 200 years, Charlie. They are directly downstream from where our founders created a Senate in the first place, to provide the sober second thought against radical sweeping change to our country. It's pretty amazing that 48 out of 50 Democrats were willing to blow up the filibuster. They were willing to break the rules to change the rules. And Charlie, that would have just been the first step towards redistributing political power in this country. The Democrats' next stop probably would have been to make Washington, D.C. a state, our federal city that is by far the most liberal jurisdiction in America. So the Democrats could get 2 more Democratic senators in perpetuity. The next stop would have been to pack our federal courts, to include the Supreme Court, to stop the courts from overturning any of these unconstitutional actions. This entire effort, Charlie, was not about just altering this or that public policy. It was about forever changing the structure of political power in our country. You sometimes heard the argument that, well, the Democrats shouldn't do this because the shoe was on the other foot. Their entire goal was to make sure, Charlie, that the shoe would never be on the other foot. So it was a critical day in the history of our country and the history of the Senate as an institution. And I'm glad we stopped these radicals. That's why we have to turn them out of power in November.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, the human rights situation, the challenge to American national security
is every bit as great. I would argue perhaps even greater than it was in the Cold War era. But Wall Street, Silicon Valley, they are all happy to not only do deals with them, but do deals with them that benefit the Chinese military and intelligence state, and they don't seem to particularly care that they do.
Well, there was stigma in helping the Soviets. There's no stigma in helping the Chinese communists.
That's right. And I think that, part of that is there's been this naivete for decades that if we just gave China money, if we gave them access to our technology, they were going to buy our blue jeans, they were going to watch some of our movies, they would become just like us. What's really happened, when you look at issues like censorship by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Good morning. I am Bruce Hooley, sitting in for Hugh Hewitt from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. You wake up this morning to the highest gasoline prices per gallon that you have paid since 2008. Gas Buddy and AAA report that gas prices Sunday afternoon national average $4.009. They always have to add that 9 on the end, of course. That's up 8 cents from Saturday. 40 cents from last week. The U.S. hit $4 for a gallon, as I said, back during Hurricane Katrina, 2008, and it's going higher. It is expected to go much higher. After all, it went up 41 cents in the last 7 days alone. The weekly rise in gas prices, second largest ever, following a rise of 49 cents in 2005. 15.8 cents a gallon on Sunday, second largest daily rise ever, coming after 18.1 cents per gallon when Hurricane Katrina tore through the Gulf, of course, back in the mid-2000s. So, where are we headed? Because, of course, summertime, gas prices typically go up. This is something that, because of the additives put in fuel during the summer months, is a typical regular occurrence. You can expect to pay more. The Biden administration, of course, is trying to do this delicate dance where they are not sanctioning Russian gas and oil, because if they did that, then the prices would go up even further. They would pay more of a toll in the midterm elections. So they're trying to, on the sly, get Iran to produce more oil. And another player, another supposed enemy of the United States, at least an enemy of Donald Trump, somebody Trump didn't like, Nicolas Maduro, dictator in Venezuela. Trump instituted sanctions against Venezuela, so of course anything that Donald Trump does must be undone. And so the Biden administration is quietly trying to buy oil from Venezuela. We will talk about this with Salena Zito of the Washington Examiner when she joins us today at about 6:51. Our other guests on the program today, we have two outstanding guests from the Federalist, Molly Hemingway, Ben Domenech, a couple of my personal favorites. And we'll introduce you to U.S. Senate candidate Mike Gibbons. He is the front runner in the state of Ohio at the moment, although there's a large majority of Republican voters still undecided in that race, which has been supremely competitive, and for which Hugh Hewitt came to Columbus, Ohio back in October to moderate a Senate debate. So we'll talk with Mike Gibbons and introduce him to you at 8:05 this morning. But what about this situation with Venezuela? The New York Times reported on Saturday that senior U.S. government officials have traveled to Venezuela to meet with Nicolas Maduro. Yes, the Nicolas Maduro, who has turned Venezuela into a dumpster fire economically. It was a great economic, a state of great economic prosperity, no longer under Maduro. And Donald Trump sanctioned Venezuela on oil. Well, again, everything Donald Trump does, whether it is the Remain in Mexico policy, whether it is the Keystone XL pipeline, it must be undone if you are Joe Biden. So, Maduro, trying to find someone to buy his oil, says, America is hurting. The people don't like to pay high gas prices. Joe Biden would not like to have a 60-seat loss in the midterm elections. Perhaps now things have changed in Venezuela's relationship with the United States of America. The Wall Street Journal, CBS News, also verifying the Times report. Wall Street Journal reported late last week that Venezuela had reached out to major Wall Street firms to push the Biden administration to reopen diplomatic talks and lift oil sanctions. Now, this, of course, does not sit well with Republicans in Congress who have an inherent distaste for dealing with dictators, whether it is Xi Jinping, whether it is the Ayatollahs in Iran, whether it is, Vladimir Putin, and, of course, Nicolas Maduro. Marco Rubio tweeted, Joe Biden using Russia as an excuse to do the deal they always wanted to do anyway with the Maduro regime. Rather than produce more American oil, he wants to replace the oil we buy from one murderous dictator with oil from another murderous dictator. Now, speaking of Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, Marco Rubio was on State of the Union yesterday with Jay Tapper talking about the inanity of buying oil, which we are, from Vladimir Putin, financing a war in Ukraine that we say we want to stop.
You've introduced legislation to ban the import of all Russian oil to the U.S. There is growing bipartisan support for that idea on Capitol Hill. Secretary of State Blinken just told me that the Biden administration is seriously discussing it. Americans are already dealing with high gas prices. Should they prepare for that to get even worse in order to stand up to Putin?
Well, first of all, let me just say that the fact that people believe that not buying Russian oil, not having Russian oil would raise our gas prices is actually very concerning, because that proves that Putin has the leverage and the power over America to raise our gas prices anytime he wants. So we shouldn't allow that to continue. We should not allow Vladimir Putin to have the power at any moment to raise gas prices on Americans by cutting us off at some point now or in the future. So we should cut them off now and replace it with American oil and have a buffer in between the time that production starts up and the time that we make the cutoff, and we can use our strategic reserves for that. That's what I hope we will do. I hope that's where the administration's headed, but it makes no sense whatsoever to continue to buy oil from Russia that they use to fund this war and this murderous campaign that they're undertaking.
So Rubio makes a good point. He is making the same point, of course, that many Republicans have made. And the Biden administration, it's one thing to be in a position of power and to have to formulate legislative initiatives that are complex, that you're not positive they're going to work or they're going to fail. With this issue, it is not a complex issue to assess in terms of what could we do in the United States of America to both make Vladimir Putin's war effort more difficult by denying him the money that he needs to fund his war machine. What can we do to do that? And at the same time, not bring to bear on the backs of the American consumer a very, very stringent cost. Gas prices do not just show up in your wallet when you're trying to fill your tank, drive to work, take your kids to soccer games, take a vacation. Gas prices show up, of course, in the items that you buy at the grocery store. Diesel fuel prices are skyrocketing as well. Diesel fuel fuels America's trucking industry, which gets those goods from wherever they are produced to market, provided we can get those goods off the ship, of course. But so you are seeing prices at the grocery store skyrocket, And another outgrowth of the Ukrainian war that you are going to see is that Ukraine is one of the world's largest producers of fertilizer, of urea, of potash. How could that impact me, Bruce? Well, fertilizer is used to increase the yields of American crops. I was speaking with an American farmer yesterday, a guy I went to high school with, and he said that back when we were in high school, and that's been a couple of decades, a good yield on a field was about 85 or 95 bushels of corn per acre. Now, yields on corn per acre in excess of 200 bushels per acre. Why is that? Well, they've become a lot smarter about how to rotate crops, but they've also got better seed and, yes, better fertilizer. Well, if that fertilizer costs more, and it will cost more because kind of hard to get fertilizer out of a war-torn country, maybe they aren't going to be producing as much fertilizer because, oh, by the way, if I'm out in the field doing what I do to produce the fertilizer or the raw materials that go into the fertilizer, it's a lot easier and more fun to do when people aren't shooting at me, trying to kill me. So these are all things that we see coming down the road that have not arrived yet. So while it is bad now, with gas over $4 a gallon, it is quite conceivably going to get worse. And the Biden administration could, of course, fix this by undoing what it already undid, the Keystone XL pipeline and domestic oil production. Now, you know, since the Democrats are taking a beating over this, they're going to have a narrative that will convolute, camouflage, and conceal the truth. So yesterday, right on schedule, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, in a long Twitter thread, was saying, no. U.S. oil production is not down, it's up. Let me read her tweet. U.S. production of natural gas and oil is rising and approaching record levels. More natural gas than ever this year, more oil than ever next year, and even with a global pandemic, more oil production this past year than during the previous administration's first year. Okay, let's tear this apart. The Biden administration is a master at obfuscating. U.S. oil production and natural gas and oil production is rising. Okay, well, that doesn't mean it's where it needs to be. It just means it could be incremental so you can defend it semantically that it's rising. More oil production this past year than during the previous administration's first year. I'm not really interested in that stat. I'm interested to know if there's more oil production coming than in the administration's than the Trump administration's last year, because that's when they would have had oil production ramped fully up, right? We're talking about their level of oil production in what they inherited from the second Obama administration. So this is how they say something that, well, in the words of AOC, it might not be factually true, but it's morally true, at least to them. Salena Zito, Washington Examiner, will discuss this and other issues of the day when she joins the Hugh Hewitt Show next. I'm Bruce Hooley from the ReliefFactor.com studios.
Thank you, Bruce. I want to remind everyone not to forget, if they're looking for gold, they need to go to Birch Gold via HughGold.com. That's HughGold.com. Text my name, Hugh, to 989898. I'm off for a week, but Birch Gold never sleeps. HughGold.com or text 989898. The war is the war, and it's doing what it's doing to gold prices. But when the war is over, and hopefully that is soon, we will see that the inflationary pressures in the United States did not begin with Putin's invasion of Russia. They're not going away either. You need to get diversified, get some of your retirement assets into a gold-backed IRA, the actual physical gold and silver that Birch Gold will set up for you and maintain for you. All you have to do is head to HughGold.com. They'll send you a free information kit, or text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 989898. That's HughGold.com, or text Hugh to 989898. And don't forget Relief Factor. I took it with me. I am running the island trails, which I like because they're all flat, nice ocean breeze, and it's a beautiful 70 degrees in Hawaii, right? You know, you can check the Hawaii weather. I'm asleep right now in Hawaii. But I'll tell you this. I took my Relief Factor with me because I don't want to have minor aches and pains ruin a week's vacation that comes but once a year. And that is what I want everyone to think about. You want to feel as good every day as you did on the best vacation you ever took. And that would mean usually no aches and pains, no injuries, and that usually means relieffactor.com. $19.95 gets you a 3-week starter pack. Go out and get it, buy it, start taking it, start doing it as soon as you can, and relieffactor.com will kick in sooner than you thought. 3-week starter pack, $19.95, relieffactor.com. I take it every day. You should too. Come right back after this message. For more of Bruce Hooley from Columbus, Ohio, I'm Hugh Hewitt. You're listening to The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
It's the devil!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Go to salemnow.com.
Thank you for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I am Bruce Hooley from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. And the reports this morning are that Russia has announced a third attempt at creating humanitarian corridors in the Ukraine. Of course, the previous two have been violated, and so We can hope, but certainly does not appear that is something that will occur with any great certainty. I am pleased to be joined right now by Salena Zito, and you can find her work, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, also New York Post, and, of course, Washington Examiner. And, Salena, I appreciate the time this morning. Thank you very much. You've written a very interesting story about Coca-Cola and noting Coca-Cola's objection to the Georgia voting rights bill, or the voting security bill, I guess, in Georgia, and how Coca-Cola got very, very upset about that and yet still continues to do business, big business, in Russia. Tell us a little bit about that and what's your view of American companies continuing to do extremely lucrative commerce in Russia is at this point in time as they are invading Ukraine.
Well, good morning, Bruce. Thanks so much for having me on. So, back in, what was last year? It feels like 300 years ago, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Last year, when the voting law was passed, a series of corporations, I'm sure people remember Major League Baseball pulling the All-Star game out of Atlanta, and Delta also making comments about, and I can't remember if they did anything other than to, yap about it.
Yes.
But Coca-Cola joined in. Coca-Cola is based in Atlanta, and they condemned it. And they didn't just condemn it. It was something they went on a string on Twitter. They went on the international news. They went on cable news, network news, and they really made a stink about it and how awful it was. What I found incredibly interesting is that Coca-Cola, I think it's their second largest market in the world, is Russia. And people don't just buy Coca-Cola in Russia; they make Coca-Cola in Russia, and they employ 7,000 people in Russia. Now, you would think, immediately went to Twitter, and surely they are outraged that what they're doing in Ukraine. Nothing.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a statement. There hasn't been a tweet. There hasn't been a pullback their production there, which a lot of U.S. companies have done. There has been none of that sort of response to watching another country being taken over, and people murdered, people killed right before our eyes. And it just goes to show that this corporate social activism is just a pose.
No doubt about it.
They don't want to do anything has consequence. They just want to be able to make their activist shareholders happy.
Salena Zito is our guest. You can find her fine work in the Washington Examiner, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, New York Post on her website, Salena, Salena, Zito, Zito, SalenaZito.com. We expect the Biden administration to bear a huge cost in the midterm elections, but this kind of phenomenon you're talking about, wokeness in American corporations, do you think American consumers, conservative consumers, have caught up to this, will catch up to this going forward?
Absolutely. This is our sort of distancing ourselves from what I always call our corporate or our cultural curators began happening way back in 2006. What are cultural curators? Those are the people that are in charge of mostly everything that we see, do, feel, hear, etc. in corporations, but also institutions, academia, our sports entities, our national media. And the problem is the people that run this live in the super zip codes in this world, and they don't have interaction with people that live 15 minutes out of every city in this country. You know how different things are 15 minutes outside of the city of Columbus.
Absolutely.
It's a completely different world. And that is why you see the country becoming more and more center-right, because they have nothing in common with the people that are making these decisions. So not only are we not buying their products, you see the decline in all kinds of things. Just look at the NFL and how their numbers have dropped.
Yeah,
but we also and it's caused our politics to move center right. We saw in 2020, while Joe Biden won in my state of Pennsylvania, down ballot, those seats became more and more Republican. The same for in Ohio, the seats became more and more Republican. And it's not because Republicans are doing anything particularly wonderful to draw voters over there. It's just that the Democrats are aligned with our cultural curators, and they do not feel as though they have anything in common with them.
Well, Salena, you do outstanding work. New York Post, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Washington Examiner. Catch her work at SalenaZito.com, including a very interesting story about J.D. Vance, the Senate candidate. We'll talk Ohio Senate with Mike Gibbons, the frontrunner, in the 8 o'clock hour. You are listening to The Hugh Hewitt Show from the ReliefFactor.com studios. I'm Bruce Hooley.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When you had the president in Atlanta saying to the crowd there that, he didn't march in the shoes of the students that are marching today, but that he marched in the civil rights movement, and he remembers the first time he got arrested, when he never marched in any civil rights movement and has never been arrested.
I mean, can we even believe this? That he routinely says things that everyone knows are made up. Nobody calls him on it. Look, this is why you do your program, I do my program. We need to do our best to get the truth out. And we have to be clear. The president, he's plumb loco. I don't know what is going on. I guess I would say this. I'll bet that within his administration, there is very nasty fighting because they see what we see. I'm sure Kamala Harris despises the Biden gang, and the Biden gang despises her. They have to keep that quiet. But it's really something that I think they're going to consume their own.
The Democratic Party knows that they're in trouble. When you say that their staff sees what's going on and we all see it, we got to remember one other thing. Vladimir Putin, Premier Xi, the leader of North Korea, the leader of Iran, these people all see it too. And there is a message being sent globally that America is a laughingstock right now, that the bowl of mashed potatoes that serves as the president in the White House right now is nothing more than a suit.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Could you let that happen for 10 weeks of your children being kept in a box in the library, excluded, put on display, and so on and so forth for that long? I kind of feel like, and I can tell you're a very caring mom, which is why you're bringing this public, but I kind of feel like that would happen for 2 hours, and I would be down there at that school and pulling my kid out, much less 2 to 10 weeks. Did they really endure that for that long?
They really did that for that long, and I really appreciate that question, and I've gotten that question a lot, and how we looked at it as a family is we could pull them and just go about our lives, and they'll just do this to someone else, or we could stay and fight and hold our ground. And my kids didn't want to leave that school. They've been in that school, my son, since first grade to 8th grade. They had their friends there. We still had hope that the trusted adults would do the right thing. And we eventually have pulled them to homeschool. But during those weeks, we were fighting. We have hundreds of emails to the administration, the Dallas ISD school board. We went down and I brought 30 or 40 grandmas and grandpas and other parents from other schools down to fight and speak on our behalf. Parents even scheduled protests, 3 protests outside the school. So we were fighting, but I think at this point in our country, the war has come into the family, and our kids can no longer be shielded from it. They need to be guided through it, which we did as a family, to build a backbone and learn how to stand up and fight, because this is their next generation. So instead of shielding them from it, we help them move through it with grace, integrity, and dignity, and they came out stronger.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with a clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Look at you! Ow! Hey, I wasn't ready for that.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, why are Republicans not for anything? Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, what do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You're going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people, maybe Peter Dinklage can play Grumpy. Because he'd fit right in.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
So I think in their strategy meeting, they said, okay, people say that Joe Biden's mental decline is impacting his ability to govern. Let's shoot Joe up with whatever sort of kind of
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this Monday. I'm not there. I'm in Hawaii. I'm on a beach. I'm reading, believe it or not, the Brothers Karamazov. Why? Because Arthur Brooks told me to do so. I've never done that. So that might last about one day. Then I might go back to reading about the war. But you need the news over the weekend. You need to know what happened. I got on a plane. Bruce Hooley got up and said, I will handle the first shift. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it much. Take it away from Columbus, Ohio.
Well, it is indeed my pleasure, Hugh. And I have Hugh Hewitt-like glasses on. So I'm happy to have you with me. Looking forward to speaking with Ben Domenech of the Federalist at the bottom of the hour. We come to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. I am Bruce Hooley. Very privileged to be in for Hugh, keeping you abreast of all the latest details around the world. Gas prices? Well, congratulations, America. Thank you, Joe Biden. Yes, every pump you pass hopefully has one of those I did that Joe Biden stickers on it, because he indeed did do that. He has given us the highest gas prices per gallon since 2008. Average price throughout the United States of America is over $4 a gallon. So if you're paying $3.99.9, you are getting a bargain. It is high. It is going higher. That is one of the depressing headlines today. Of course, there are an array of them out of Ukraine. What do you mean, Bruce? There's a supposed ceasefire going on. Vladimir Putin says we're going to try this again on day 3. Yeah, he also says that his campaign in Ukraine is going according to plan and will not end until the Ukrainians stop fighting. Well, they're not going to stop, and he knows that. And, of course, the pictures are, well, they are so depressing and heart-tugging when you see babies being carried to safety by Ukrainian soldiers, when you see older women scrambling for cover, when you wonder if civilians are safe coming out of their houses because you've seen bombs blow up bridges on which is a mom and 2 children. We are tiptoeing around this, afraid, I guess, to say that Vladimir Putin is committing war crimes by killing civilians, but he is, and we will get Ben Domenech of the Federalist view of all of this at 7:33 today. The Sunday news shows, of course, had lots and lots of guests with lots and lots of opinions. Florida Senator Marco Rubio was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, asking for, begging for, pleading for a no-fly zone over his country. He says, we'll fight on the ground, but we have no chance if Soviet MiGs are going to come in and bomb us into oblivion from the sky, and helicopters as well. So Zelensky has been asking for a no-fly zone. He has not gotten it, and it does not sound like he is going to get it. Here is Marco Rubio with his view of why establishing a no-fly zone, U.S. pilots engaging in airfare and air wars, rather, with Russian pilots. Here is Marco Rubio on with George Stephanopoulos on This Week, saying why that would be a very, very bad idea in Rubio's view.
You know, look, a no-fly zone has become a catchphrase. I'm not sure a lot of people fully understand what that means. That means flying AWACS 24 hours a day. That means the willingness to shoot down and engage Russian airplanes in the sky. That means, frankly, you can't put those planes up there unless you're willing to knock out the anti-aircraft systems that the Russians have deployed, and not just in Ukraine, but in Russia and also in Belarus. So basically, a no-fly zone, if people understood what it means World War III. It means starting World War III. So I think there are a lot of things we can do to help Ukraine protect itself, both from airstrikes and missile strikes. But I think that people need to understand what a no-fly zone means. It's not some rule you pass that everybody has to oblige by. It's the willingness to shoot down the aircrafts of the Russian Federation, which is basically the beginning of World War III.
Well, I understand the concern, but I also understand that I don't really agree with the term beginning. I think when Vladimir Putin poses troops on the border of a sovereign nation, Ukraine, and invades it without provocation and shows no respect for innocent human life with indiscriminate bombing, he's already set in motion his intention to take back the former parts of the Soviet Union that were broken apart. And so Are we going to allow this only up until he goes and invades a member of NATO? Is that something that really, from a conservative perspective, for me, as a defender of innocent unborn life, as a pro-life advocate, I have to ask myself, am I truly pro-life if I'm not willing to support a no-fly zone because it might lead to World War III, which might end my life? That's a very difficult question. And so I'm sure the people who are in power and have the authority to do this are struggling with this issue, but it is a complex issue in that, is Ukraine where this ends with Vladimir Putin? Joe Biden said last week that Putin wants to put back the Soviet Union as it was. He sees it as one of the great geopolitical injustices of all time that the Soviet Union had to break up. So does that mean Latvia, Estonia are next? Those are NATO countries. We are, by Article 5, sworn to defend every NATO country. So is this just a matter of time before we get to having the inner peace we need to take on Vladimir Putin? I don't have the answers to this, but I think these are complex issues. And what I do see and what I do know is that from the withdrawal in Afghanistan, from our appeasement of Putin, failing to put on sanctions at the time it could have retarded his efforts, shown him we were serious about clamping down on his desire to take Ukraine. I think we have unquestionably appeared very, very weak on the international stage. And I don't think it's coincidental that Vladimir Putin did not do what he has been engaged in over the last 2 weeks. He did not do this while Donald Trump was in office. And this is something that Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, brought up yesterday when she was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd. Now, it's always entertaining on a Sunday to hear the leftists shriek and complain about guests that appear on shows that Democrats perceive to be their own exclusive platform. They were highly, highly agitated yesterday that Chuck Todd would dare to have Nikki Haley and Joe Manchin on his program. The last time I checked, Joe Manchin is a Democrat, although he sat with Republican senators during the State of the Union, which also precipitated a Democratic outcry on social media. But Nikki Haley was pointing out on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd when Chuck Todd tried to say, well, yeah, but Donald Trump, he's kind of at fault for this. Nikki Haley points out that, Donald Trump had a habit of saying nice things about leaders that we take a very dim view of, Kim Jong-un, Vladimir Putin, but that it is not important to evaluate what Donald Trump said. Nikki Haley pointing out to Chuck Todd that it is instead important to take note of what Donald Trump did to sanction Russia.
Well, first, I'll tell you, my very first speech at the United Nations was in support of Ukraine and hitting Russia. Protocol at the United Nations was to meet with the Russian ambassador first, and I purposely threw protocol out the window and met with the Ukrainian ambassador first. Putin is an evil tyrant. He has proven it, whether he tries to poison his political opponents, whether he shoots down planes, whether he assists Assad with chemical weapons in Syria. He has shown us time and time again that he is evil. What I will tell you about President Trump is, as much as everybody wants to talk about what he says, what I look at is what he did. He sanctioned Russia. He expelled diplomats. He shut off Nord Stream 2, which is all Putin ever wanted. He built up our military, and he made us energy independent. All of those things countered Putin and countered Russia. This never would have happened under Trump. What we have to look at now is, how do we make sure this doesn't go further under Biden? This has been a terrible mistake that all started with Afghanistan. And one thing after the other, we've done nothing but show weakness. We have got to show strength. So what I would say is, you can talk about past presidents all you want, but the last thing you need to be doing is looking for the TV remote when your house is burning down.
No,
we've got to start dealing with the situation at hand.
Yeah, she's absolutely right. And the best indicator of what's going to happen is what's already happened. And if you remember the words of Robert Gates, former defense secretary, Joe Biden, he said, had been wrong on every major foreign policy decision throughout his Senate career, 4 decades. He opposed every military action and covert action that Ronald Reagan took to break up the Soviet Union. Biden was against all of that. He was absolutely wrong, as we all know, with the humiliating withdrawal from Afghanistan. So to have Joe Biden ostensibly, I'm not sure if he really is, in charge on matters of international importance is not a good thing for the United States of America. And we're seeing that play out every single day. I am Bruce Hooley, on for Hugh Hewitt from the ReliefFactor.com studios.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
So I think in their strategy meeting, they said, okay, people say that Joe Biden's mental decline is impacting his ability to govern. Let's shoot Joe up with whatever sort of kind of adrenaline that is necessary and deploy him out there. I think the point was to try to show that Joe Biden was going to go over the top long, to try to win kudos and praise from the establishment media. This is his first press conference I think he's done in quite some time. Some people said it was his first ever press conference as president. Second? Okay. That was his second press conference. Trump used to do these almost daily. He did them for fun. And I will say, for reasons that we can speculate, the media was pretty critical. They were direct, precise. Now, nowhere even in the ecosystem, nowhere even in the atmosphere of questions towards Donald Trump. And I agree with my friend Tucker Carlson. The press conference was totally weird. It was a strange deal. Joe Biden leaning in. He does this thing where he kind of like hunches over the podium. You notice that, Connor? And he kind of puts both of his arms down and he looks directly at the reporter. And then he whispers, you're exactly right. And he was still calling from a pre-selected list of reporters. And there were multiple blunders that came out of that. But if the point was to try to show the nation, look at, hey, if you have any concerns about how sharp this guy is mentally, I mean, come on. He stood there and talked for 2 hours. I don't think that mission was accomplished.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific.
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler?
Hello from the Heartland. I am Bruce Hooley, sitting in for Hugh Hewitt today on the Hugh Hewitt Show from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. Latest headlines out of Ukraine. The refugee crisis escalates. The estimates are 1.7 million Ukrainian refugees right now. There is hope that Russia will honor the ceasefire that it has announced, but of course it did not honor the previous two ceasefires. Russian shelling yesterday prevented hundreds of thousands from taking the safe passage that they hope to find out of Ukraine. And so we'll keep our eyes on those headlines today. Domestically, gas prices are over $4 a gallon. That's the national average for the first time since 2008. Yes, we are at a record high, and soon will surpass the all-time record high. That is the estimate of gas industry analysts because, of course, we have the summer months coming, and gas prices always go up in the summer months because of additives, and we do not know yet where we are going with this oil crisis. We are still buying oil from Russia. There are increasing calls from people in Washington, D.C., on both sides of the aisle to cease our purchase of millions of barrels a day from Russia. They are the second largest supplier, exporter of oil throughout the world. Saudi Arabia, the only country that exports more oil than Russia. So we will see where that goes, and we'll talk about all of this with Ben Domenech of the Federalist at 7:33 this morning. But right now, a reminder that every year at this time, Hugh turns to you for generous gifts to help Christian nonprofit Food for the Poor. It's a great, great, great initiative. Together, you and I are helping do very positive things to help feed hungry children in the nation of Honduras. So far, our network-wide campaign has raised enough to feed over 700 children for the next year, but with 60% of Hondurans living below the poverty level and the entire country still suffering in severe poverty, there are many, many children who are in desperate need of your help. Just listen to Linda, who works with Food for the Poor in Honduras.
When you see the hunger, when you see the need, you go out on the field, even if they haven't eaten for 1 or 2 days. It just makes us real sad. The more we do, the more we see the need. The more places we go, the more we find people starving. The more we see children are eating the leaves from the trees.
So that's why Hugh is partnering with Food for the Poor, because no child should be eating leaves when life-saving food is ready to be rushed. If only you will help, just go to HughHewitt.com, click on the Food for the Poor banner, or you can phone your donation to this special number, 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-HOPE. $88 feeds a hungry child for an entire year and provides access to clean water for a lifetime, or $175 offers the same blessing to 2 kids for a year. Any amount will help, and you will be blessed by helping share the love of Christ with the poorest of the poor in Honduras. One more time, please go to HughHewitt.com. Help us feed more hungry kids through our friends at Food for the Poor. Nikki Haley, Marco Rubio, Chris Christie, all on the Sunday news shows yesterday. Chris Christie got into it with Donna Brazile, talking about her inane assertion that Donald Trump somehow had a part in this. Chris Christie noting what all of us note. Gas prices are going up. We have the capacity to produce more oil domestically. Joe Biden shut down the Keystone XL pipeline on day one of his presidency. Why don't we do what we can do? Then we don't need to buy Russian oil. Chris Christie taking up the case for Donald Trump and his energy policy on This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
George got to do 2 things at the same time, and you should be able to. You have to ban Russian oil, and you have to increase domestic production. And that is where Joe Biden's going to have the problem, because he's held captive by the environmental left. That what John Kerry, his guy, said last week, that the real tragedy of Ukraine is it's slowing our efforts on climate change. That will summarize what the far left's view is about domestic oil production.
Climate change, we just saw the UN report this week. This problem is an existential crisis, and it's getting worse.
And I don't think any of us are naive.
Tragedy is in Ukraine?
I don't think any of us
people are being
what is the
slaughtered.
definition of
That's
tragedy?
what Kerry is talking about.
See, for those of us who are conservative, this is a case that, while it infuriates us, it is a case we hope that the Democrats continue to make. And you heard George Stephanopoulos there. He's a true believer. It's an existential threat. Whether it is or it isn't, I'm not going to, and I'm not qualified to say, but I can say this. What feels like more of an existential threat, an imminent threat, is that I'm paying $30 per fill-up at the pump. That's an existential threat to our family's budget. We could stop it. We're not. I'm Bruce Hooley from the ReliefFactor.com studios. Back next with Ben Domenech of the Federalist.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Operations, you find that they have this concept that loosely translated English means big help with a little bad mouth. And basically what that means is they're willing to allow people they do deals with in Congress, the Biden family, on Capitol Hill, Wall Street. They're willing to allow those individuals to provide some criticism because they recognize that it maintains credibility for those individuals.
Wow.
What they don't want, Dennis, is for them to sort of go to the third rail, which is number one, cut off Chinese access to Western capital markets and restrict the flow of technology, not stolen technology, but technology given to China. They don't want those two elements stopped.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Was Sonia Sotomayor saying to them that there were 100,000 children in hospitals, many of them on ventilators? Eric, I went and looked up the data immediately. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that I've posted regularly the death rates of COVID-positive people and heart disease and cancer. There are only 119,000 people hospitalized for COVID in the nation as we sat there that day. So you're saying 100,000 of them were children when the data shows that only 5 children are hospitalized out of every 100,000 hospitalizations. There was maybe 6 kids in the hospital, none of them on ventilators that I could find.
6, 100,000. Who's counting? Hey, we're all about
this is the
we're all
problem.
about grace. We're all about grace,
and
bro.
it's a whole consistent pattern, Eric, that they used to do kind of in the shade. They would make more implications than direct statements. They wouldn't campaign on things that were factually false. The left has lost its rooting, its mooring, anything that's holding it,
But how many
tethering it to
people do
reality.
we know in the evangelical church who do not give a damn about this? They absolutely don't seem to understand that when leaders lie, when they do these kinds of things, it hurts people. It usually hurts poor people the most. And we have many in the evangelical church who have absolutely turned a blind eye. Again, this rises to levels unprecedented in American life. I mean, it's one thing to say we have differences. This is a level of political theater, of lying and grandstanding that is so pernicious to the fabric of the republic.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
I grew up poor, which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go
I am Bruce Hooley, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios, in for Hugh Hewitt today on the Hugh Hewitt Show, originating from the studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. And you are waking up in an America where gas prices are the highest they have been per gallon since 2008. Gas nationally is over $4 per gallon. We will discuss this and other topics related to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and a war that continues to rage, even as Russia says for the third consecutive day that it will observe a ceasefire and will not impede refugees from leaving the cities and towns that they are attempting to evacuate. That, of course, has not happened in the previous two ceasefires, and in fact, it did not happen yesterday. Searing story today in the New York Times about a family, a mom, two kids, blown up on a bridge as a Russian bomb hit the bridge while they were trying to escape. You will find that story not only in the New York Times, but on the timeline of my next guest. He is Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist. It's my pleasure to welcome Ben to the show. And Ben, I was struck late last week in an appearance that you made on Special Report. You said what I thought was so insightful, and that is that we are in an era now where we see war happen in ways that we did not see it happen in the Vietnam War, in World War II. We saw a little bit of it happen during the Gulf War, but I think we're getting more pictures, more reporting on the ground. And you made the point that we are one picture away, one story away from it affecting us on an emotional level in ways that headlines don't impact us. And I wonder if you think this story in the New York Times is such a story, a mom, two children blown up by a Russian bomb.
I think that that's already happening right in front of us, and thank you for your kind words. I appreciate them. Look, the reality is that we live in a new environment when it comes to the immediacy of information. The imagery that is coming out of Ukraine is obviously jarring. It is something that is, for many Americans, I think, a very troublesome thing to see. And Americans are wrestling with the fact that they don't want to get sucked into an incredibly damaging and devastating European war, one that could impact a lot of our allies and certainly American soldiers and end up with them in harm's way. At the same time, I think that it is impossible to not feel the reaction to seeing this kind of murder, this kind of just insidious and terrible activity on the part of the Russian government, and to not feel the need to react. Now, the problem is, of course, that for many of our political leaders, there is no clear reaction. They want to try to brush Putin back. They want to try to make this whole thing difficult for him and have him back off. But nothing that they've done to this point has changed his mind, his dedication to his goal, I believe, of recreating the Soviet map from prior to the end of the Cold War. And I think in this case, we have a very limited set of tools that we can use, but one that is right there for the taking that Joe Biden could use, and frankly, I hoped that in the State of the Union he would use, is America's own energy resources, resources that he has obviously stunted in service of his climate agenda and the befuddled and ridiculous, in my view, approach that they have used to climate and Green New Deal adjacent policy, let's put it that way. And instead of going back or questioning any of it in a way that obviously would have been bipartisan, would have gotten the approval of not just Joe Manchin, but I think of another slew of key Democrats who, come from energy-rich states who would like to see America use this tool in a direct economic way to push back against Russia's ability to sell its gas at inflated prices, which is funding this war. Instead, they have shown only dedication to this John Kerry-esque agenda, and I think it's madness. It's utter madness. It's just leaving the best tool that you have in your toolbox as opposed to taking it out. And that actually increases the likelihood that we end up being sucked into a hot conflict with Russia, because if you're not going to use that type of power, then eventually people's demands get enough to say, just stop it. Just do whatever you have to do to stop it. And unfortunately, you and I both know that means a much heavier use of American military might, which risks a number of other things on the international stage.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. We're speaking with Ben Domenech of the Federalist, publisher of the Federalist, and follow him on Twitter at bdomenech, Domenech. I think your point about the allegiance to the Greenies is well taken, but we saw in Joe Biden's State of the Union address, Ben, it's not like he's unwilling to part from the leftist, the most left part of his wing with his, which was a lie, but his inane comment, fund the police, fund the police. We know Cori Bush, we know Jayapal, we know that AOC is not going to get on board with that. I think it's, I'm not a political strategist, but I think he could do far more good than harm to his party by doing what he needs to do, increasing domestic energy production to lower gas prices. If he's willing to part with them on funding the police, even though I don't really believe he believes that or will do that, why is he not willing to take them on energy? Because I think, again, the gains would far outweigh the losses.
Because the sins, I think, against the left are on two different levels. The climate agenda really is an aspect of religion for them. It is total dedication. They honestly believe in what they're doing and what they see as something that is morally unquestionable. And I think that as opposed to that, something like funding the police is essentially a new slogan. The defund effort is something that hasn't been around for that long and already has had some significant negative ramifications for blue cities and blue states in terms of the approach. People are not happy when they see that kind of immediate uptick in crime and in violence. And that's something that I think, a lot of smart Democrat consultants are saying, back off, back off, back off. You don't have that same feedback loop when it comes to the climate agenda. And I think because of that, you're ending up in a situation where the Biden administration, by dint of being so wedded to this, doesn't see their path forward, which I think is fairly obvious, which is to give the energy interests a short-term win, meaning, partner with Lisa Murkowski, Joe Manchin, et cetera, and basically say, what do you want to do when it comes to energy policy to increase domestic energy and to push back against Putin, and then give the green folks, what they want in terms of a long-term package. And that means obviously a bunch of fake green jobs and all sorts of things that would make you and I very upset, but would almost certainly pass the Congress. And do so, I think, with flying colors, and only have the strongest fiscal conservatives opposed to it. That's something that I think Ron Klain and the White House could do, but the fact that they're not doing it just shows you how dedicated they are to this agenda and how much it now drives what the Democrats do in ways that, as we see in Ukraine, are now having deadly ramifications.
Yes, Ben Domenech, our guest, publisher of The Federalist. Follow him on Twitter at bdomenech, Domenech. your point's well made, and it shows to me, it underscores the fact they don't have control of their own party. They could call them into the White House. They could explain their strategy. They could tell them to silence it. They're not doing that because they know they can't control them. And you said, they can't take the win on what is a very doable policy, but I'm not surprised. You're not surprised they didn't take the win on Omicron. They could have opposed that as a less lethal variant, and we're winning this, and instead they had to magnify the danger of it. So we have a lot of issues on the conservative side we can win on in November. We clearly have the southern border. We clearly have gas prices. They're going to continue to go up. What I'm curious about is we saw the phenomenon with Glenn Youngkin in Virginia and parents. That's an issue that Republicans can win on too. And I see a potential for a win, but also a potential for an inarticulate argument to be made on the conservative side for this indoctrination in our schools of transgenderism, SEL, social emotional learning. We're going to see this play out on the national stage with this swimmer from Penn University, Leah Thomas, who is a biological male. Leah Thomas is going to dominate at the NCAA championships in swimming. This is an issue that I think is extremely unpopular, not just with conservatives, but I think across the board. But I wonder, do you believe that Republicans are articulate enough to make this case against why this is damaging to a lot of causes that leftists have embraced over the years? Title IX, opportunities for women, war on women. Can Republicans make this case eloquently enough in a way that it will not bounce back on them as being hateful toward the person, not toward the agenda?
I think that's a big question, and I don't know that we know the answer to it yet. I think we're going to have to go through this cycle and see how it plays out. But I think you're focusing on the right thing, which is that the fear of being hateful toward the person is going to make a lot of Republicans change the way they talk about this in ways that I think will unfortunately lead to them not necessarily leaning into this issue as heavily as they ought to. Look, it's a radicalizing experience. If you are the father of daughters, and you see them, swim and go up and do their best to make it all the way to the top tier of their sport, only to have their experience brushed back by someone who's a biological male and who certainly was not winning or performing at the highest level prior to this supposed transition, then you end up in a situation where I think you just respond to this, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, with total distaste, dissatisfied with what's gone on, dissatisfied with the fact that everybody's sort of playing pretend, and frustration that the system isn't protecting your girls. In this situation, though, I think that Republicans need to not make the mistake of running away from the issue. Glenn Youngkin showed, I think, time and again that leaning into these controversial issues, leaning into the culture war conversation was not something that hurt him. In fact, it helped him significantly. He went from being a more generic Republican candidate to being somebody who was a champion of a number of different issues, and he did so by being very definitive about the direction that Virginia schools would take, not just when it came to CRT and controversial issues like that, but with regard to masking and reopening and taking on the teachers' unions directly. That's something that I think every Republican should be interested in doing. They should focus on it, and it will make a difference in November.
I think you're exactly right. I so much appreciate your work and your perspective that you bring to the Federalist and to Special Report. Ben Domenech, read him on his Twitter feed at @BDomenech. I'm Bruce Hooley, and you are listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show from the ReliefFactor.com studios.
Thank you, Bruce. I want to remind everyone, Relief Factor, before you leave the house, ReliefFactor.com. Icarian and Curcumin, resveratrol, and Omega. Whenever I see ads on TV for this or that product, I always look for their ingredients. And they've got 1 or 2 and sometimes 3 of the 4 that Relief Factor uses, because it's no magic. What magic is the amount and the kind and whether or not you remember to take it and whether or not it's easy to open and swallow and whether you take it every single day. That's why Relief Factor's opening offer, they lose money on every first order, $19.95. Designed for you to test it. Designed for you to try it and say after 3 weeks whether or not it actually is doing what thousands of people believe it is doing, which is triggering the body's natural anti-inflammatory mechanisms versus nature's anti-inflammatories. ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 get you started. Head over there and then come back for more Bruce Hooley right here on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
We'll see one young lady identify as transgender, and the next thing you know, 6 or 7 young ladies in that same school are now identifying as transgender.
Children taught at age 5 they can create their gender identity, and it's being celebrated.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Every cell of their body that has a nucleus is male or female.
We've now seen parents losing custody of their children if they don't go along with this.
We've all been created XY or XX, so that means there's only 2 genders. And so really the battle is against the creator.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Bruce Hooley in for Hugh Hewitt today. As Hugh is vacationing in Hawaii, it's my pleasure to join you from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. Thanks to Ben Domenech of the Federalist, who just joined us. We will be joined by U.S. Senate candidate Mike Gibbons, striving to get the Republican nomination in the state of Ohio. Mike will join us on the other side of the 8 o'clock hour. He is, from the latest polls, the leader in efforts to succeed Rob Portman, who is retiring as senator from Ohio. The latest headlines, well, you knew already that China had shared U.S. intelligence with Russia. Nikki Haley decrying that on the Sunday show yesterday, Sunday news shows yesterday, talking about why are we negotiating with our enemies. Here's this little bit of happy news, in addition to the fact that this morning you are paying the highest price per gallon of gasoline in the United States than you have paid since 2008. And it is expected that with the summer typical rise in gas prices coming because of additives and the like, you will be soon paying record prices. Gas leaping 20-cent increments per gallon, it seems to me, here in the heartland per day, but it gets worse. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi told reporters at a news conference this morning that Russia is China's, quote, most important strategic partner as war rages between Russia and Ukraine in the 12th day. Here's the quote. No matter how perilous the international landscape, we, meaning China, will maintain our strategic focus and promote the development of a comprehensive China-Russia partnership in the new era. The friendship between the two peoples is ironclad. Wow. So Visa, MasterCard are ending their business in Russia, but China's UnionPay is positioned to step in and fill the breach. They, of course, are going to be buying Russian wheat, and if our Biden administration ever gets to the point where we're actually sanctioning Russian oil and gas, well, don't be surprised if China steps in and backstops Russia there as well. So our administration has completely screwed this up, put us in a position where Vladimir Putin is emboldened to do what he would not do under Donald Trump. And that weakness comes through when you listen to Secretary of State Tony Blinken. He's on with Chuck Todd on Meet the Press yesterday, saying that, sure, we're doing what we're doing with sanctions and the like, but don't expect this situation in Ukraine to end anytime soon.
You know, how this ends is an important question. And I wish that we could see signs that President Putin was willing to engage diplomatically to bring this aggression to a close. Right now, we're not seeing them. He was on the phone, President Putin, with President Macron of France a couple of days ago, and by all accounts, according to the French, he's digging in and doubling down. And I think we have to be ready that this could go on for some while.
Oh, it's an important issue, yes. Oh, well, I mean, they have a grasp for the obvious there at the State Department, that it is an important issue. What about banning Russian oil? Nancy Pelosi says it'd be a good idea. Jonathan Karl yesterday of ABC News, he's on board with it. Tony Blinken, though, telling Chuck Todd that, well, we're talking about it with the people who I guess could give us permission to actually do it.
Chuck, I spoke to the president and the cabinet, the leading members of the cabinet, about this just yesterday from Europe. And we are now in very active discussions with our European partners about banning the import of Russian oil to our countries, while, of course, at the same time maintaining a steady global supply of oil. The actions we've taken to date have already had a devastating impact on the Russian economy. We see the ruble in free fall. We see the economy heading into a deep recession. We've already had a major impact, but we are looking, again, as we speak, in coordination with allies and partners, at this prospect of banning oil imports.
So it's interesting you added the in coordination. We will not do this unilaterally. The United States is not going to do this unilaterally.
A hallmark of everything we've done to date has been this coordination with allies and partners. We are much more effective across the board when we're doing things together in as close a coordination as possible. There are instances where we each do something a little bit different, but it complements the whole. So in the first instance, we want to make sure that we're acting in coordination. I'm not going to rule out taking action one way or another, irrespective of what they do, but everything we've done, the approach starts with coordinating with allies and partners.
All right.
So the pause is telling, and you can tell from that pause that Antony Blinken knows how bad it sounds that we are waiting for our European allies to give us permission to sanction Russian gas and oil. The phrase leading from behind, infamously offered by Barack Obama during his presidency, was not a misstatement. It is a strategy. He said the quiet part out loud. We are leading from behind. Of course, if you are behind, you are by definition not in front. And if you are not in front, you are not leading. And so we look more and more impotent on the international stage, which of course emboldens Vladimir Putin to do exactly what he is doing, which is ignoring all the impact of the sanctions because he's not accountable to the Russian people. That's not how it works here. Mike Gibbons, U.S. Senate candidate, striving to hold our administration accountable. He joins us next on the Hugh Hewitt Show from the ReliefFactor.com studios.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with two senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, two former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
What the Supreme Court has said is you have to have a compelling state interest, and the compelling state interest that the Supreme Court found was the benefits that flow from having a diverse student body, whatever those benefits may be. But you have to have a diverse student body to get these certain benefits, okay? So that justifies this kind of racial alchemy in terms of admissions. Here's the problem. Increasingly at schools, you have, regardless of how supposedly integrated they are, you're getting more and more racial separatism, separate classes, separate dormitories, separate graduations. There's more and more of that going on, and one of the basic reasons for that is because of mismatch, because of the serious mismatch in academic qualifications between Asians, Latinos, blacks, and whites.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You want to know what's even crazier and funnier in a sick way? There's a security guard right there. The shoplifter, the looter, walks right by the security guard who isn't doing anything. He's got a jacket on with the big security on the back of his coat, and he stands there and watches the guy. The guy literally brushes right by the security guard. The security guard, what are they paying the security guard for? Just to stand there? Why don't we just put mannequins up in stores in New York? I may never go back. I swear, I may never go back. New York is turning into a hellhole, and Democrats are watching it. They're letting it happen. I can't wait to get Joe Borelli's take on all of this insanity.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
You called your son, and you personally promised him you would be here.
Lucas, I don't know how to help you.
Your daddy loves you, you gotta know it, pal.
Do you feel the love?
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
What reason does he have to care about some guy who's supposed to be his dad, but he's never around? I can't do it again. I'm not ready for this, man.
I'm done with you.
We all deserve a second chance. Right, Ethan?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Sometimes there are policies so destructive that at first you don't believe they're true. Joe Biden is currently defending one, his plan to award $450,000 to migrants separated from their families after entering the U.S. illegally. Children of deceased U.S. soldiers are separated from their parents permanently. They don't receive this kind of money. And migrants who enter the U.S. legally certainly don't get this kind of payout. The really big jackpot, it seems, is being reserved for the lawbreakers. There are some obvious truths here. First, behavior that's subsidized gets repeated. Joe Biden is effectively inviting many more illegal immigrants to breach America's open borders. Second, he's betting over time the payoffs will benefit his party in political terms. Meanwhile, the vast majority of Americans watch in shock and dismay as our president, the country's chief law enforcement officer, brazenly rewards lawbreaking, a clear violation of his oath to defend our nation's laws. It's a sorry sight indeed.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
It seems like the Democrats tried their best to try to eliminate the filibuster, and it failed. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thankfully, it did fail. Republicans stood united against that, as we have been from the very beginning, and Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin also stood with us in preserving the rules and the customs of the Senate. These rules and customs go back more than 200 years, Charlie. They are directly downstream from where our founders created a Senate in the first place, to provide the sober second thought against radical sweeping change to our country. It's pretty amazing that 48 out of 50 Democrats were willing to blow up the filibuster. They were willing to break the rules to change the rules. And Charlie, that would have just been the first step towards redistributing political power in this country. The Democrats' next stop probably would have been to make Washington, D.C. a state, our federal city, that is by far the most liberal jurisdiction in America. So the Democrats could get 2 more Democratic senators in perpetuity. The next stop would have been to pack our federal courts, to include the Supreme Court, to stop the courts from overturning any of these unconstitutional actions. This entire effort, Charlie, was not about just altering this or that public policy. It was about forever changing the structure of political power in our country. You sometimes heard the argument that, well, the Democrats shouldn't do this because the shoe was on the other foot. Their entire goal was to make sure, Charlie, that the shoe would never be on the other foot. So it was a critical day in the history of our country and the history of the Senate as an institution. And I'm glad we stopped these radicals. That's why we have to turn them out of power in November.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
This really is a Leninist strategy. Lenin's old saying that the capitalists will sell us the rope by which we will hang them is what China's doing. The Soviets couldn't do it for a couple reasons. Number one, they didn't have the money. They didn't have a whole lot of rubles to throw around, and people in the West didn't want them. But number two, there was a lot bigger sense of social cohesion during the Cold War. The notion, if you're a corporate executive during the Cold War, that you would be playing footsies with the Kremlin was outrageous. And yet in the case of China, by big tech in the United States, when you look at some of the other things that are going on, it's not that China's become more like us. We've actually become more like China. And that experiment has to fade away. And the problem is not only were our elites wrong in their prescription of that policy, but that policy made them rich. And they do not want to now give up those relationships with Beijing because it means the money's going to stop flowing.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt on this Monday. I'm not there. I'm in Hawaii. I'm on a beach. I'm reading, believe it or not, the Brothers Karamazov. Why? Because Arthur Brooks told me to do so. I've never done that. That might last about one day. Then I might go back to reading about the war. But you need the news over the weekend. You need to know what happened. I got on a plane. Bruce Hooley got up and said, I will handle the first shift. Thank you, Bruce. I appreciate it much. Take it away from Columbus, Ohio.
Well, it is my pleasure, Hugh, to take the baton from an Ohio guy, and I am coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio, where we have a spirited Senate race on the Republican side of the aisle to succeed Rob Portman, and we will introduce you to one of those candidates, another Ohio guy, very shortly here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. The headlines today, of course, not good. Gas per gallon, highest price on average in the United States since 2008. And gas industry analysts say it's going higher to record levels. Of course it is. It hopped about 20 cents per gallon per day last week. Where will it go? Nobody knows. We have yet to have an administrative decision in Washington to ban Russian gas and oil imports. Oil fuels the Russian war machine, which is enacting disastrous casualties on civilians in Russia. But don't worry, Russia says they will allow for humanitarian corridors for civilians to escape. Of course, they said that Saturday, they said that Sunday, and they continue to lob bombs at Ukraine and blow up women and children. Can it get worse? Yes, it can. China this morning is touting its friendship with Russia as its most important strategic partner, which I'm sure will come as very disappointing news to Hunter Biden for all of his efforts to bring us closer to Chairman Xi Jinping in China. And Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, is urging a global boycott of Russian products if the war continues. It will continue. Putin is not going to stop until he gets what he wants in Ukraine. And thanks to the bravery and courage and valor of the Ukrainians, he has not gotten it yet. Oh, by the way, Russia has skipped appearing in court in the Netherlands. An international court of justice was supposed to hold them, or at least hold a hearing today where they were expected to find Russia, I don't know what, in contempt for going into Ukraine. Yeah, that's a slap on the wrist. It'll do nothing. And they showed their disdain for the international court by not showing up. So let's get to the Senate race in the state of Ohio, because there's a lot of conversation nationally about the midterms and the damage that will be done to the Biden administration by what we hope is a red wave in the fall in the House, in the Senate. Senate is a more ticklish matter. We have more Republican seats up for re-election than we do Democratic seats. And a guy who is hoping to become a first-term senator from the state of Ohio in November is Mike Gibbons. And Mike joins us now on the ReliefFactor.com hotline. And Mike first has to win the primary in the state of Ohio. And congratulations, I guess, are in order, Mike, because the latest polls that I have seen, not from a campaign, but from an independent group, have you on top in the state of Ohio with 22%. Josh Mandel behind you at 15%. But my guess is with that large chunk of undecideds, you're not relaxing. You're continuing to get after it on the campaign trail in Ohio.
You're exactly right, Bruce. Good morning. I use football metaphors in a lot of my commercials, and I don't believe in a prevent defense. and you being an Ohio football fan, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
No doubt about it. That's Hugh doesn't want to talk about prevent defenses. He would remember that 86 championship game where the prevent defense cost the Browns. But you are on top, but you're on top by a margin that is outside the margin of error, but the largest chunk of Ohioans are still undecided in the Republican primary. Why do you think that is, and what is your strategy to get them from undecided to decided for Mike Gibbons?
Well, first of all, I think it's typical to have a large undecided piece going even into election day, and people are confused. There's a lot of people running here, and and what we're doing is trying to introduce ourselves to more of those people every day.
Well, you can take the opportunity here to do that. Tell them about yourself. You're a Cleveland businessman. Every headline I see with you, Mike, says you have deep pockets and you're spending millions of dollars on your campaign. And I'm always amused by these kinds of headlines as if it's a bad thing to be a successful businessman in America.
Well, it does bother me, and it kind of sticks in my craw a bit. I was born in the inner city of Cleveland on the top of a double on West 77th Street. My dad was then we moved to Parma. I don't know if you know Parma, but Parma is actually the seventh biggest city in the state. And but if you know Parma, it wasn't like we had lots of country clubs or golf. In fact, there was only one golf course in the city. I didn't golf until I was 27 years old. My dad was a high school teacher and a wrestling coach, and basically our family was about sports. I was fortunate enough to be pretty good academically and was able to get scholarships through school and learned about business. We didn't even know a businessman growing up, and I found the business of investment banking. And a few decades ago, I started a firm in Cleveland, Ohio, with a desk and a phone, and it's now grown to be one of the larger middle market firms in America. So I've been very fortunate. And people keep saying, "Oh, you're not raising money. You don't have support for the outside." Well, the reality is, I'm raising plenty of money, but I didn't feel comfortable talking to all the big donors until now. Being an investment banker, I try to make my decisions on the basis of facts and return on investment, and I wasn't worth investing in until I could prove myself out, and I think I've done that now. So we're really picking up the pace on the fundraising.
Mike Gibbons is our guest. He's running for the Republican nomination for Senate in the state of Ohio. It is a crowded race, but according to the Hill Emerson College poll released last week, he is on top of that race with 22% of the vote. Josh Mandel, who was previously run for Senate, state of Ohio, former state treasurer in Ohio, has 15%. J.D. Vance, the author, Hillbilly Elegy, comes in at 8%. Jane Timken, former GOP party chair in Ohio, and Matt Dolan, a state senator from Ohio, at 6%. And you can find more about Mike on his website, gibbonsforohio.com, or on his Twitter site, Mike Gibbons OH. Mike, you have campaigned, and a lot of people have campaigned. Mandel, Timken, I don't know anybody except Matt Dolan who's not campaigning, that you are a candidate who appreciates the policies of Donald Trump, and you believe that our country would be better off getting back to that. What do you see that motivated you to run for Senate, and what do you see happening in our country now that, from your perspective, needs to be corrected?
Well, I've got 5 kids, Bruce, and the thing that originally instigated my thought was one of my sons. I mentioned our family's about sports, well, I kind of raised my kids the same way. And we had no military in our family. We didn't have relatives that would, introduce that possible path in life to us when I was a kid, and my sons and daughters didn't either. I had one son that graduated from Georgia Tech with a degree in aerospace engineering, joined the Navy, is now a Navy pilot. And my wife and I went and visited him down in Pensacola, and I walked away from there thinking I had to do something. As I said, I started out with nothing, but for this great country, I wouldn't be where I am, and it's my chance to give back.
Mike, everybody in this field is seeking Donald Trump's endorsement. He has not endorsed yet. There have been some headline endorsements. Rob Portman has endorsed Jane Timken, and that brought a flood of kind of other politicos, Joni Ernst and some others who have endorsed Jane Timken. You have the endorsement of Rand Paul. Have you made any inroads toward getting Donald Trump's endorsement, and do you think the 45th president will endorse anyone in this race?
I don't know the answer to that question. I was Trump's finance co-chair, state of Ohio finance co-chair in 2016. I was as active as I've ever been in a campaign, and I did it because largely for the same kinds of reasons I'm looking at for running. I didn't like the direction of the country. I got tired of throwing stuff at my television, I guess, and I saw a guy that said he wanted to fix a lot of the things that I thought needed fixing, and sure enough, he did. I think right now with the Ukrainian situation, you can see that Biden basically, through his compliance with the left wing of his party, has put our country in a very dangerous position. We had, we were energy independent, and he came in and made sure he has the bully pulpit. When you're running an oil and gas company and they say, we're going to get rid of oil and gas and we don't like you guys, and then you have some of his appointees saying they want to shut him down, people don't make investment.
Yeah, that's been a big-time problem and it certainly is showing up at the pump. We're seeing that every single day. Mike Gibbons, Senate candidate, Republican side of the aisle, state of Ohio. He's the leader in the polls right now. Gibbons4Ohio.com, at Mike Gibbons OH on Twitter. I'm Bruce Hooley from the ReliefFactor.com studios, in for Hugh Hewitt on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I'm gonna get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
When you had the president in Atlanta saying to the crowd there that, you know, he didn't march in the shoes of the students that are marching today, but that he marched in the civil rights movement, and he remembers the first time he got arrested, when he never marched in any civil rights movement and has never been arrested.
I mean, can we even believe this? That he routinely says things that everyone knows are made up. Nobody calls him on it. Look, this is why you do your program, I do my program. We need to do our best to get the truth out. And we have to be clear. The president, he's plumb loco. I don't know what is going on. I guess I would say this. I'll bet that within his administration, there is very nasty fighting because they see what we see. I'm sure Kamala Harris despises the Biden gang, and the Biden gang despises her. They have to keep that quiet. But it's really something that I think they're going to consume their own.
The Democratic Party knows that they're in trouble. When you say that their staff sees what's going on and we all see it, we got to remember one other thing. Vladimir Putin, Premier Xi, the leader of North Korea, the leader of Iran, these people all see it too. And there is a message being sent globally that America is a laughingstock right now, that the bowl of mashed potatoes that serves as the president in the White House right now is nothing more than a suit.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
This is a story of how 1 million children were placed with local foster families through an unlikely alliance between the Chinese government and a British footballer. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans. With unprecedented access across the country, this is a unique insight into the lives of the 90s orphans now driving the 21st century's fastest growing economy.
This story needs to be told across the world at a time where there's so much negativity and cynicism.
It is a pleasure to be with you today on a Monday. I am Bruce Hooley in for Hugh Hewitt. You vacationing, and we are coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. We'll speak with Molly Hemingway of the Federalist at 8:33 this morning. The headlines overnight, Russia says that it will allow for humanitarian corridors coming out of Ukraine so the refugees can get out. The refugee count is at 1.7 million right now and going up. But people, for instance, in the city of Mariupol are living in terror. I tried to evacuate 200,000 people yesterday. It failed because the shelling continued. Of course it did. Russia promised ceasefires on Saturday. On Sunday, neither did it observe. And so there is pessimism as to whether or not it will observe that ceasefire today. Of course, pessimism reigns if you are an average, ordinary, everyday American and you have to drive to work and you are filling up with gas this morning. You are paying record high per gallon gas prices, over $4 per gallon nationwide on average, according to AAA. That is the highest prices have ever been per gallon since 2008. And the estimate is that, yes, we will set a record for gas prices very, very soon. Why not? Gas is jumping 10, 15, 20 cents per gallon by the day, it seems. We have not yet sanctioned Russian oil and gas. And, of course, the Biden administration will blame the hike in gas prices, not on shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline, not on sending the unmistakable message regulatory-wise and with the withdrawal of leases for drilling on federal lands to the oil industry that, hey, we're not friendly toward fossil fuels, so I wouldn't, if I were you, sink tens of millions of dollars into building new refineries. No. It's all the fault of Vladimir Putin and Russia. That will be, of course, the viewpoint coming forward from the podium in Washington, D.C., where Jen Psaki over the weekend released a Twitter thread saying, no, domestic oil production is actually increasing. It's not up. You're meant to infer from that it is up. But increasing just means it's, incrementally more than it was maybe a day, a month ago. Still not adequate. That we are absolutely certain of. I'm also certain that every year at this time, Hugh turns to you for generous gifts to help the Christian nonprofit Food for the Poor. Together, you and Hugh and I are helping do very positive things to feed hungry children in Honduras. So to help feed those hungry kids, join our network-wide campaign. We've raised enough to feed over 700 children for the next year, but with 60% of Hondurans living below the poverty level and the entire country still suffering in severe poverty, there are many, many children who are desperate for your help. Just listen to Linda, who works with Food for the Poor in Honduras.
When you see the hunger, when you see the need, you go out on the field, even if they haven't eaten for 1 or 2 days. It just makes us real sad. The more we do, the more we see the need. The more places we go, the more we find people starving. The more we see children are eating the leaves from the trees.
Oh, that's such a sad story, and that's why Hugh is partnering with Food for the Poor, because no child should be eating leaves when life-saving food is ready to be rushed to them. If only you'll help, go to HughHewitt.com, click on Food for the Poor banner, or you can phone your donation. We make it very, very easy. Here's a special number, 855-359-4673. That's 855-359-HOPE. $88 feeds a hungry child for an entire year and provides access to clean water for a lifetime, or $175 feeds 2 kids for a year. Any amount will help, and you will be blessed by helping share the love of Christ with the poorest of the poor in Honduras. Once more, please go to HughHewitt.com and help feed more hungry kids through our friends at Food for the Poor. Representative Pramila Jayapal, with a fatalistic view of gas prices going up. Here she is on MSNBC with Tiffany Cross, cut 16.
No matter what we do, prices of gas are going to go up. So any Republicans who try to say that it's drill, baby, drill, and that solves the problem, it's wrong. That is not the case. We are going to see gas prices rise, but it is in service to trying to quell a dictator.
Oh, yeah, it's going up anyway. You can't do anything about it. So we should double down on wind and solar and, I don't know, fry oil, or not drive as much. Stay home. Do what we tell you. Pramila Jayapal, her compassion for her fellow Americans is touching. We'll be back with Molly Hemingway of the Federalist next on the Hugh Hewitt Show from the ReliefFactor.com studios. I'm Bruce Hooley.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
You let that happen for 10 weeks of your children being kept in a box in the library, excluded, put on display, and so on and so forth for that long. I kind of feel like, and I can tell you're a very caring mom, which is why you're bringing this public, but I kind of feel like that would happen for 2 hours, and I would be down there at that school and pulling my kid out, much less 2 to 10 weeks. Did they really endure that for that long?
They really did that for that long, and I really appreciate that question, and I've gotten that question a lot. And how we looked at it as a family is we could pull them and just go about our lives, and they'll just do this to someone else, or we could stay and fight and hold our ground. And my kids didn't want to leave that school. They've been in that school, my son, since 1st grade to 8th grade. They had their friends there. We still had hope that the trusted adults would do the right thing, and we eventually have pulled them to homeschool. But during those weeks, we were fighting. We have hundreds of emails to the administration, the Dallas ISD School Board. We went down, and I brought 30 or 40 grandmas and grandpas and other parents from other schools down to fight and speak on our behalf. Parents even scheduled protests, 3 protests outside the school. So we were fighting, but I think at this point in our country, the war has come into the family, and our kids can no longer be shielded from it. They need to be guided through it, which we did as a family, to build a backbone and learn how to stand up and fight, because this is their next generation. So instead of shielding them from it, we help them move through it with grace, integrity, and dignity, and they came out stronger.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
You called your son. You personally promised him you would be here.
Prayer is a powerful thing, Ethan. It really does work, if you believe.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
This is Hugh Hewitt for townhall.com. Buckle up for 2022. The year in politics is going to be rough. The midterm election year seems predestined to banish the Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress. The country senses infirmity in President Biden, and many worry that our adversaries in China, Russia, and Iran sense that opening too. The shadow campaign for the GOP nomination in 2024 opens now, with the clear frontrunner being former President Donald Trump. The ranks of the top tier among possible GOP presidential nominees in alphabetical order starts with 2 senators, Arkansas's Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz of Texas. Then we have the populist Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. If the world grows even darker in the days to come, Cotton and Pompeo, 2 former soldiers, start with some advantages. It's possible one or more will run whether or not the former president does. My bet, with 3 years to go, is that Trump runs, and runs hard. Buckle up. I'm Hugh Hewitt.
Publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Look at you! Ow! Hey, I wasn't ready for that.
And there goes Peter Dinklage beating the crap out of Will Ferrell for calling him an angry elf. I mean, listen, he's certainly not an elf, but he's an angry guy. You know, I hate to put everything in a political perspective here, but isn't it true? And I assume Peter Dinklage is no conservative. He's woke. He wants to cancel Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Why do they always want to cancel everything? You know, they want to cancel everything. What do conservatives believe in? We are for things. Biden's always saying, why are Republicans not for anything? Yes, we're for everything. We're for people. We're for people's right to make decisions about their health. We're for movies. We're for different views on the airwaves. We're not for people being canceled or movies being canceled or things being canceled. We're for things. And your side, Biden, is against everything. You're against Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Oh, I mean, Disney obviously taking it seriously because they're redoing the whole movie, I guess. Seriously, what do you portray them as children? Should child actors play the Seven Dwarfs? You going to get little Billy or Susie, who's about 9? The Seven Dwarfs in Snow White aren't children. Grumpy isn't a kid. I mean, in fact, that would be a great, if they're casting people.
It's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
It is a pleasure to be with you. I am Bruce Hooley, sitting in for Hugh Hewitt today on the Hugh Hewitt Show from the ReliefFactor.com studios. The war in Ukraine continues. There are hopes, of course, that Russia will observe the ceasefire that is announced a third straight day. So I don't know how much hope you should put in that, because if they honored it on the first day they announced it, well, they wouldn't have had to announce it on the second day or the third day. But that is where we are. Hope for a humanitarian corridor was dashed on days 1 and 2 of the Russian announced ceasefires because, of course, there are searing pictures out of Ukraine, particularly a story today in the New York Times, a woman and 2 children blown to their death on a bridge. This may be, who knows, the picture that prompts the Biden administration to bring the full brunt of what it could do to sanction Russia. Or maybe not, because it is, of course, trying to navigate this delicate balance between appearing to be very harsh on Russia, strictest sanctions ever, you know. But what about gas and oil? Funding that Russian war machine? So far, no. But Antony Blinken is taking it under advisement, he said on one of the Sunday news shows yesterday, asking our European allies, would it be okay if we sanctioned Russian oil and gas? Yes, I know it's a nonsensical position to take, but let's discuss it further with one of my personal favorites. She is the editor-in-chief of the Federalist. You will find her on Twitter at MZ Hemingway. I'm, of course, talking about special report veteran Molly Hemingway. And Molly, thanks so much for your time this morning. Joining us, Antony Blinken yesterday, I thought, reflected weakness on his appearance on various Sunday news shows by saying that, yeah, we're thinking about it, we're talking about it, but we have to ask our European allies first if we can actually go ahead and sanction Russian gas and oil.
Well, the real weakness that we've seen is everything leading up to this decision by Putin to invade Ukraine. Our posture for decades, in general, with limited exceptions, has not been great in managing this conflict since the end of the Cold War. It is actually not bad to think prudently about what we're doing in terms of sanctions, because there's so many second-order and third-order effects. That's where I don't think you're seeing Americans really thinking through what the long-term consequences are of some of these actions. And I think they're more concerned about appearing tough than actually thinking how to end this humanitarian disaster, how to end it quickly without risking literally nuclear war. And it doesn't seem like there are a lot of adults thinking through these very difficult issues.
What are some of the things that you see on the horizon, those ripples in the pond, if you will, that you don't think are being taken into account and that this administration and the decision makers don't have the foresight to see coming as a result of what they've already done?
So in general, I think that people should be thinking about what's in America's interest first and foremost, and rejecting some of these other approaches that seem to not care at all about what America's interests are in Russia's horrific decision to invade Ukraine and cause this unnecessary war. We're just seeing some of the same tired talking points without a sense that people understand the risks that are in play here. I mean, take even some of what we've done with sanctions and getting Russia off of the financial system.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. dollar being the reserve currency gives us a lot of power. It enables us to have a lot of debt. Moving everybody into a different system and making the U.S. dollar not so important is a very bad situation for us, even in the short term, but certainly in the long term. You see how some countries have not gone along with the West's approach to isolating and sanctioning Russia, which means that this increases the power of the Eastern blocs, China and India working with Russia on supply chains, and a means out of some of the sanctions that we've put on them. We do not want Russia and China to be stronger. We don't want that alliance to grow stronger. It's already too strong, and we should be thinking through not just this particular horror that we're experiencing, but how much worse it truly could get.
Molly Hemingway is our guest. She is the editor-in-chief of the Federalist, and you can find her thoughts and her content on her Twitter feed, which is at MZ Hemingway. I would highly encourage you to buy her latest book, which is Rigged, How the Media, Big Tech, and the Democrats Seized Our Elections. That's available everywhere that books are sold. You know, Molly, I don't know if you saw the headline this morning. The Chinese foreign minister has called Moscow, quote, the most important strategic partner to Beijing, says no matter how perilous the international landscape, we will maintain our strategic focus and promote the development of a comprehensive China-Russia partnership in the new era. So it certainly appears that China is prepared to backstop Russia, buying wheat, a lot of other things, to accomplish China's purpose, which is, of course, to hurt the United States. And I think we're all waiting to find out what China does with Taiwan, because certainly what we do with Russia and Ukraine, it may not be apples to apples, but it's certainly a template. What do you see happening on this stage, and maybe what should we have done to keep this partnership between China and Russia from growing as strong as it appears to be growing?
This entire debacle couldn't be happening at a better time for China as it continues its Cold War with us. And you think back to Kissinger and how he talked about the importance of triangulating the relationship between the Soviet Union, China, and us. That was part of why Nixon got closer to China, was to constrain the Soviet Union. And now it seems that China and Russia are understanding that and working that against us. But it also brings to mind, we're doing all this against Russia. Meanwhile, China has been eating our lunch in many ways, becoming more dominant on the global stage for decades. And U.S. companies and our government and other Western governments have not been willing to do what they need to do to keep China from dominating. And then, just playing right into their hands of getting distracted from our need to keep China as the primary focus of our national interest-based foreign policy by what's happening here with Russia and Ukraine is just sort of par for the course for us. This is what I'm talking about when I'm saying, we're looking at what we can do in the short term to prevent what Putin is doing in Ukraine. And we should be thinking very wisely about it and how it relates to our entire strategy and how our entire strategy really needs to be more focused on China.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. I just think that, in order to be wise, you have to understand the problem. And I'm never honestly sure whether the Biden administration is incompetent or just, has a much different agenda than I do, which is for America to prosper and to maintain its position of strength. I harken back to something Joe Biden said in Iowa in 2019, where he basically downplayed China. He said they're not even competition for us. They're small. So I don't know. Do they really understand what they are dealing with here? And if not, what hope do we have that they can possibly get their arms around it?
Well, and keep in mind, we just went through that 4-year term where we were told that the Trump family, which was known to be a global business family, had all these compromising ties with other countries. Meanwhile, the Hunter Biden and the Biden family business is totally entangled with China. You had Chinese communist-owned groups working with the Biden family on massive deals, and we're not even talking about whether that relates to why Biden is not willing to do anything intense against China. And then it's just hard to take him seriously at all when day one was to weaken our energy production, to harm our energy production. There's no way you can be serious going against Russia, which is not just an energy base. It has other things that we should be mindful of as well. But when we can't take it seriously, any effort to go against them, when we are crippling our own energy supply.
Molly Hemingway is our guest. She's the editor-in-chief of the Federalist. Find her on Twitter at MZ Hemingway. You know, there's so many familiar faces in the Biden administration. Jake Sullivan, Susan Rice, on and on and on and on. Obama famously said in his presidential debate with Mitt Romney, the 80s, want their foreign policy back. He posed China as the threat. Then Biden comes in. We talked about the comment in Iowa that China's not really a threat. Do you see, Molly, any difference in how these people who are advising Biden and have positions of influence in his cabinet and in his administration, have they gained any clarity here on what the threat is to America, or are they just unrepentant, blind idealists who are going to plow through no matter whether world events confirm their view of how things should be or not?
I am just shocked at the level of incompetence that we're seeing, even as the world is on the brink of what could be a world war with nuclear implications. I almost wish they were more ideological rather than just the incompetence that we're seeing. But you're also seeing it's not just the Biden administration. I think a lot of people on the outliers of the Biden administration, in the think tanks, in corporate media, are not being serious right now about what a fraught situation this is. And they are amping up calls for things that could quickly lead to war. You mentioned Blinken on the show yesterday and him talking about fortifying Poland if Poland decides to enter the conflict. I mean, this is not something that should be talked about lightly, because this is the type of thing that leads to actual world war. And that is not a pretty thing, and I think people can kind of romanticize this. This is a serious disaster we're facing, and people should be doing everything in their power to end it as quickly as possible, as peacefully as possible. We should be thinking off-ramps for everybody, because this is not a good moment, never a good moment to fight a world war, but this is particularly not a good moment for us to be involved in a world war, given our economy and given what we're dealing with domestically.
Molly, I appreciate your perspective, and I really thank you for joining us today. Molly Hemingway, follow her on Twitter at MZ Hemingway. She is the editor-in-chief of the Federalist. And to her point, the Biden administration thought that if it disclosed all the intelligence that it had about what Russia was doing, that would retard Russia from doing what it's already done. At some point in time, maybe you change strategy here and don't necessarily advertise that you're backstopping Poland if they send planes. Maybe it'd be a good idea to keep what you're going to do secret from Vladimir Putin before you do it. I'm Bruce Hooley, in for Hugh Hewitt in ReliefFactor.com studios.
Thanks, Bruce. Don't go anywhere, America. Time for me, Hugh Hewitt, to remind you about AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. They've been my friends for 20-plus years now, for Andrew, 10 for Todd. And through that whole time, Andrew's been doing the same thing. Making mortgages happen. They're with Pacific. They're with Share Pacific. They lend money. All right. It's not a brokerage house. It's not we'll shop your loan around. No, they underwrite your loan. They take a look at your credit. They find out how much they can afford to lend you. They look at the house that you are buying. They tell you whether or not you're spending the right amount of money on housing, or they help you refinance the house you've already had, or buy an investment property, all the different things. A reverse mortgage, a VA loan, they all do it there. And they've been doing it for 20 years. And I've watched Andrew do it. I've done an immense small group with Andrew. I'd hear him talk about how much he loves his work, how much he loves his clients. And that's you. So call AndrewandTodd.com today by calling 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. Great rates are still available, but you got to act. They're going up. And then finally, last time today, Bruce Hooley probably is looking for the relief factor in his office by now, because I tell every single show for the last 10 years, first hour, second hour, third hour, bottom of the hour, I tell you the same thing. Don't forget your relief factor. Mostly that's just a public service for the thousands of you. I had 6 million listeners. So there are thousands of you who are taking ReliefFactor.com. I mean, the youngsters don't need it. They feel like they're invincible. But as you get over 40, you begin to feel it. And as you're over 50, you really start to feel it. And when you're Carl's age, you're barely moving. And so I want you to remember, ReliefFactor.com. Dwayne, if we get Dwayne to take ReliefFactor.com, he might come in. I don't think he came in for Bruce today. But ReliefFactor.com. Whether or not Bruce was there, whether or not Dwayne is doing his job. ReliefFactor.com will make you do your job with less pain. Nature's anti-inflammatories, Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. They're in every package of ReliefFactor.com. Get
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands, kill him. Jump.
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build a superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Schools are lining up to push the transgender agenda on kids and cut parents out of the equation.
Go to salemnow.com.
How 1 million children were placed with local foster families. Parents from all walks of life share their stories of overcoming the one-child policy by taking in orphans.
Go to salemnow.com.
It's been my pleasure today to sit in for Hugh Hewitt on the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm Bruce Hooley, coming to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios of 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. I wish you well with the challenges that you have. We are paying higher gas prices than we've paid in America since 2008. Second highest prices of all time. Gas is over $4 a gallon. The Biden administration, will they relent? Will they sanction Russian gas and oil? If they do, gas is likely to go higher. Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. They have a plan for that. They are negotiating a old JCPOA with Iran, because if they negotiated a new one, they'd have to get it passed in Congress, which they, of course, could not get it past Congress. Congress has, at least on the Republican side of the aisle, a funny view of dealing with enemies like Iran. And they're up in arms in Congress, at least they are on the Republican side of the aisle, that we've started to play footsie with Venezuela. You say, wait a minute, Venezuela? Isn't that where Nicolas Maduro has enacted all kinds of havoc Yes, it is. But we have a weird kind of anti-counter Godfather approach the Biden administration does. It's not the enemy of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's my enemy is my friend when I'm trying to fight Vladimir Putin, or at least make it appear that I'm fighting Vladimir Putin to the American citizenry, but not really doing anything to make Vladimir Putin angry. Yes, I know it makes no sense, but speaking of Democrats who make no sense, give a listen to squad member Pramila Jayapal. She's kind of the Ringo Starr of the squad, talking about the Ukrainian struggles are, sort of kind of like what she and her fellow squad members are going through here in America.
But I will just say that there is a connection between what we are trying to do domestically and what we are trying to do internationally. Let me give you 3 ways that that's the case. First of all, democracy. We are both in the European Union and, with the war on Ukraine, the aggression of Russia on Ukraine, and here in the United States, we are trying to show that democracy works. We cannot allow suppression of votes domestically, nor can we allow dictators in Europe or anywhere in the world to take over. So that is a real connection. Secondly, if we ever want to be truly free of the ability of dictators to blackmail us over oil and gas, we should be investing right here at home in renewable energy technologies. We should be weaning ourselves of fossil fuels so that this situation that we're in does not happen again in terms of, feeling like we can't stop Russian oil and gas imports because it's going to drive up prices here at home. By the way, no matter what we do, prices of gas are going to go up. So any Republicans who try to say that it's drill, baby, drill, and that solves the problem, it's wrong. That is not the case. We are going to see gas prices rise, but it is in service to trying to quell a dictator. And finally, if we want democracy to work, Tiffany, then we've also got to show that we don't have these massive inequalities of wealth and income, which is why we need to lower the cost of childcare, lower the cost of housing, lower the cost of prescription drugs, so that we can show people that it actually matters to have a democratic country, a country that invests in everybody. So that's how I see these two things going hand in hand together, and it's why we're not going to stop working on the domestic agenda.
Yeah, and you know there are some through lines here. I look at what's happening in Ukraine, and I see, democracy can be a fragile thing, and it feels a bit fragile in America right now. We're seeing, the Republican Party bleed it by 1,000 cuts with rampant voter suppression. The Florida Republican-controlled state legislature just advanced a bill that was pushed by the Republican mayor, Ron DeSantis, Florida man, who would create a police force dedicated to pursuing election crimes. This is not a thing. So it's not lost on me that we're in a midterm election year. Russia has previously tried to attack our democracy by sowing discord here in the United States, hacking into some of our democratic systems.
Wow. Of all the egregious dumb things said during that 2-minute word salad that you had there for breakfast, courtesy of Tiffany Cross of MSNBC and Pramila Jayapal, the demotion of Ron DeSantis from governor of Florida to mayor, I don't know what city, to mayor of Florida, apparently. Yes, thank you, Dwayne. Did you know that Ron DeSantis was the mayor of Florida?
He actually is Florida man.
Yeah, so there you go. Florida man, mayor, Ron DeSantis. Yes. Hopefully he's the next president of the United States, or somebody like him, because we certainly need a different president than we have. So just to tear apart a little bit of that, gas is going to go up no matter what we do. Why? It was $1 less per gallon, about maybe way less than $1 less per gallon a year ago, 2 years ago at this time when Donald Trump was president. And yes, of course, Pramila Jayapal would say that what we really need in this country is another social program, free childcare, free college, free everything except gas. Gas is not free. Gas is, in fact, more expensive than it has ever been, and it is going to go ever higher. You will be apprised of all the latest details on all the latest headlines here on the Salem Media Network today. Catch all the interviews. I want to thank my guests today: Molly Hemingway, Ben Domenech, Salena Zito, Mike Gibbons, Thank you to Hugh. Thank you to Dwayne for all of you guys making it so easy. I'm Bruce Hooley. My pleasure to come to you from the ReliefFactor.com studios. Have a great day.